Summary of The Telltale Heart for 8th grade. The Telltale Heart is a famous creepy short story by Edgar Allan Poe about an unnamed narrator who tells the reader about a murder he committed. The crime and the motive. The narrator lived with an old man. He didn't hate the old man, but he was so disturbed by the man's eye, which he described as being like that of a vulture, a blue eye, veiled by a film, that he decided to kill him. For 8 nights, the narrator would sneak into the old man's room while he slept. On the final night, an accidental sound woke the old man. When the narrator saw the dreaded eye again with his flashlight, he carried out his plan and killed the old man. The cover-up and the police. After the murder, the narrator cut the body into pieces and carefully hid them under the room's floorboards, believing he had erased all evidence of the crime. The police arrived shortly after, alerted by a neighbor who had heard a scream. The narrator insisted that the old man was out of the country and that the scream the neighbor heard was just a nightmare of his own. Feeling confident about his perfect cover-up, he let the officers into the room where the crime happened and even sat and talked with them there. The confession. As the narrator talked with the police, he suddenly began to hear a rhythmic, muffled sound. He realized it was the beating of the old man's heart, even though the man was dead and hidden beneath the floor. The sound grew louder and more deafening in his ears until he couldn't bear it any longer. Overwhelmed, the narrator finally confessed to the murder. Key takeaways and themes. Guilt and the mind. The story is a deep dive into the mind of a killer. The narrator believes his meticulous planning proves he isn't mad, but his own mind and guilt are what ultimately betray him. He commits a perfect murder, but his conscience leads him to confess. The eye as a symbol. The old man's vulture eye that drives the narrator to murder is an important symbol. It represents the narrator's own insecurity and fear of being judged by others. By trying to destroy the eye, he's trying to get rid of his own internal demons. Poe's style. Poe was a pioneer of psychological horror, focusing on characters consumed by obsession and madness. He wrote the story in the first person to put the reader directly inside the disturbed mind of the murderer. The mysterious heartbeat that causes the confession is an example of the fantastic element. An event that makes the character and reader question what is real and what is psychological. The Telltale Heart, Summary and Analysis. The Telltale Heart is a classic short story written by the American author Edgar Allan Poe. Story summary. The story is narrated in the first person by an unnamed protagonist who, from the beginning, insists that he is not insane. The narrator lived with an old man whose eye, described as that of a vulture, a blue eye, veiled by a film, disturbed him so much that he decided to murder him. For 8 days, the narrator spied on the old man while he slept, until an accidental noise woke the victim. Seeing the eye again, he carried out his plan and killed him. After the crime, he cut the body into pieces and hid them under the floorboards of the room. The police arrived, alerted by a neighbor who heard a scream. The narrator, confident in his meticulous crime, assured them that the old man was out of the country and invited them to the room where the murder took place. In the middle of the conversation, the protagonist began to hear the rhythmic beating of the old man's heart, which grew louder and more deafening. Unable to bear it any longer, the man finally confessed his crime. What kind of work is it? The Telltale Heart is primarily a short story belonging to the genres of gothic fiction and horror fantasy. However, its greatest innovation lies in its profound immersion into the human mind, establishing it as a pioneering work of psychological horror. Literary genre characteristics in the work. Short story. It is a brief narrative, conceived to be read in one sitting. Gothic fiction. It adopts the tone and some settings, such as confinement in the house, to represent the mental states of the characters, rather than focusing on ghosts or vampires. Horror. Fantasy. It creates a disturbing atmosphere. The fantastic element, the uncertainty in the face of an apparently supernatural event, is added at the end with the heartbeat that only the protagonist hears. Psychological horror. It is the most prominent aspect of Poe's work. It focuses on exploring the mental processes of an individual afflicted by obsession and paranoia. It shows that the torment doesn't come from an external monster, but from one's own mind and guilt. Man confronts himself. Analysis and main themes: guilt and conscience. The main theme is that, despite the narrator carrying out a perfect murder, his own mind betrays him. He cannot bear the weight of his conscience, and this leads him to confession. The eye as a symbol: judgment. The vulture eye is the driving force behind the crime. It is not the eye itself, but the feeling it evokes in the protagonist, that of feeling judged and insecure. By eliminating the eye, he tries to free himself from his own insecurity and the gaze of others, a burden he ultimately cannot bear. Narrative structure. Poe uses first-person, confessional narration, so that the reader becomes a kind of jury, entering into the narrator's paranoia. In addition, he uses rhythm and detailed descriptions of sounds, such as a heartbeat, to create an effect of suspense and anguish in the reader.